everyone, and welcome to Playwright, a podcast about creating and sharing new ways to play. My name is Ryan Hamann, also called H.
And I'm Ryan Quintal, also called Q.
Q, I gotta tell you, the coolest thing happened this week, actually involving our show.
Oh.
On Twitter, Sean Bell from one of our earliest episodes, from episode 8, which you can look up on the podcast player of your choice, or on our website, of course, got in contact with us because there was a recent game jam, and one of the games coming out of that game jam was eerily similar to the game that we had pitched. Not in the way that I'm like accusing anyone of stealing an idea, because first of all, like,
can't steal these ideas.
It doesn't seem like there's any kind of crossover between, like, you know, I don't think he had listened to it beforehand. And second of all, even if he had taken an idea from us, that's the whole reason we do the show. You are welcome to take any idea and do anything that you want with it. And we're not owed any kind of compensation or anything like that. That's everything goes out into the public domain, as it were.
A little strangely, that also means what we're doing is creating a bunch of content that, say, EA could go make a game of.
That's
and
true.
Then copyright.
Yep. They certainly could. And I like to think that each of the ideas that I pitch are things that I want to see exist anyways. And so if somebody does and they cut us out of a huge multi-million-dollar franchise, then at least we'll have a couple of fun games to play.
Fine if our legacy becomes those weird bearded dudes who live in a basement that says, I invented that, they took it from me.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so the point of it is I wanted to point everyone towards a recent Game Jam game by a programmer named Adam Finley from Team 17, who created a game for a Game Jam called Killer Frequency. You can find it. It's a free download online. There's also some YouTubers that have covered it already. So, you know, just however you want to consume the content, but it is remarkably similar to the pitch that we did in Sean Bell's episode, actually, which we called KRDO, in which you play like a small town radio host in a small town in which like strange things happen. And so in this game, in Killer Frequency, there's a kind of psychotic killer out on the loose, and you try to use your radio show to guide people that are out in the night to safety, versus ours, which had a more of a kind of paranormal, as we are wont to do, bent to it, which is, more kind of like ghost and demonology type stuff. But I just thought it was really cool. And so I got in contact with Adam and just kind of, wanted to express like, hey, super cool thing that this idea was realized. And I love how you kind of conquered some of the challenges that we had run up against when we were brainstorming it in the little 10 minutes that we had. There were some nice creative solutions around some of the problems that we were experiencing. And so, and he's a very nice guy. We had a nice little chat and got to share the show.
Did Adam end up confirming that it was based off of the episode?
Oh, no, it definitely wasn't. Like,
okay.
I shared the episode with him afterwards, and that was the first time that he had heard it. Which is just fine. But I just think it's like a really cool little bit of like kind of two minds hitting on the same idea and coming out with like fairly similar results. And I was very happy to see something that we had pitched here in a roundabout way kind of come to be a real thing.
That inspired, like, maybe we should spin up a new section of the site. Maybe we should wait till we get more of these, but spin up a page on the site where we have kind of like the faux Hall of Fame, the Playwright Hall of Fame of games that just so happen to come close to describing it. Of course, we can put little, descriptions of like, not actually, like, didn't actually know about the episode or whatever, or something like that. But if people listen to the show and you hear an experience you're interested in, and that experience exists somewhere, then like, let's point you to it. And, obviously if it's not like a, Kojima game or something like that.
So that was sent in by Sean Bell because, he remembered being on that episode, which was kind of a lucky break in this case, because I don't think I would have found it otherwise. And so I just also wanted to kind of encourage listeners as well. If there's anything that we've discussed that has been since turned into a game or was a game already that we just overlooked, then please do email us, playwrightcast@gmail.com, or you can even just post it in a message on the pitching portal on our website at playwrightcast.com/pitch. Just however you want to get in contact with us. We would love to play these games, to see ways in which our ideas converge and deviate. It's just, I don't know, it's very exciting. And of course, to build up that kind of backlog of projects that have, well, I guess ways to really experience some of the fake games that we're pitching on here.
Yeah, and you know what? While the backlog is not exactly empty here with messages, we'll be able to get to some messages really soon. And if you've got a great idea, we always do our best to try and get those ones to the front and center. So please send it in, and you will hear yourself within maybe a month's time, I would say.
I guess with that, let's go ahead and get to the video games. So Q, what are you bringing us this week?
My pitch this week is pretty simple, and it's so simple I fear I may have pitched something like it before, but summer's in the air, and it's got me thinking about a game about mowing lawns.
Okay.
I would like to have a sort of game, and I know that they just recently did sort of gardening, and they added that to House Flipper, but I love the idea of gamifying the mowing of lawns. So maybe you are a neighborhood lawnmower, and you get paid based on how good of a job you do, but of course, how good of a job you do is measured by how often you retread the same ground. So you're trying to never go back over grass you've already cut. Maybe you have the mechanics of grass being mowed in either direction to get those sort of cool striated patterns. And so maybe some people want fancier lawns than others, or all lawns have different layouts and different obstacles. So anyway, I figured it was a cool space for us to play with.
All right, starting the clock there. So I don't think this anecdote is really going to add anything to the pitch, but the first lawn mowing game that I ever played was a mini game in Putt Putt Joins the Parade, I think it is, where you had to earn a little bit of excess money to purchase hand puppets or something. I'm not remembering all the details, but you needed a few coins, and so you got to go in the backyard. And I just remember it being very easy to complete. Like you can just mow like one lane of the yard and get paid for it, which I always felt like that's kind of teaching poor values to the children.
Give up immediately, kids.
To say like, okay, I did a 10th of your yard, pay me now. But I don't know. I always found it very satisfying. I would always do the whole yard and make sure it looks nice. It didn't have as complex controls. I think the most recent lawn mowing game that I've played is No More Heroes.
No More Heroes has lawn mowing in it? Oh, okay. That changes my expectation as to what that game contains.
It's primarily a lawn mowing. No, it's that's just one of the silly little side activities that you can do. But there's a certain kind of like meditative quality about lawn mowing that I think this really gets into. I think taps into some of the kind of inherent goodness of pulling weeds in an Animal Crossing town.
Yeah. And you know what? I do like the idea of maybe the lawn mowing feeling like you're sort of dispatching yourself on missions and having a sort of equipment phase. Maybe your truck can only hold so much stuff in it. And depending on if you're trying to optimize for time or efficiency or something, you may say, look, you could do the whole tech tree upgrade thing, whatever. If you have a rider lawnmower, that's going to take up most of your truck. So now you can only have like a rider lawnmower and your worst sort of unpremium weed whacker, which is slow, but you're like hoping that you're going to make up the time with the rider.
So there's a few ways that I can think of taking this. One is in turning it into like a business management type thing. Kind of like the truck driving simulator games, is that you do that kind of like, I want to say feet on the ground, but that's not really the case in truck driving simulator because you're in an elevated truck, but you do the actual work. But at the same time, you're also kind of building up funds so you can hire other drivers to do kind of passive work while you're doing other types of work. So you're making money off of the other drivers and kind of building a business around the business that you're also performing. If you were building up a workforce, you could turn it in the direction of like programming kind of like Roombas, like automated lawnmowers or Groombas, as it were, for grooming the lawns.
I thought you were going to say green Roombas, which would also be a fitting acronym for a Roomba.
And so you could be programming these AIs in different ways and optimizing their programming, and then that could be a little bit more kind of like hands-on gameplay that would be a little bit more involved than just the kind of like standard, the types of missions you've seen ever since like Assassin's Creed 3 or something, where it's just like select a group, choose a destination, and wait for them to come back with money. And then alternatively, another way you could take this is being a very kind of like silly, elevated, kind of like a dive kick type of game where, it's just meant to be kind of like silly and ridiculous. And so you're given these kind of like random wacky characters, like a shinobi character, and you have to find a way to mow the lawn with your shuriken, or, all these different types of like lawn mowing challenges, kind of like what the golf, I think it's called, the upcoming golf game, which is anything but a golf game, where you have to figure out, based on the tools that I have and based on the wildly varying mechanics, what am I allowed to do to mow the lawn in this scenario? So I'm happy to take it in a more serious direction or a silly direction.
Well, we could spend a couple minutes on each. I love the idea of going absurdist on it, just because, like, what I could imagine you get by doing that is something where there's a game called, I think it's called Terrible Chess. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, very bad chess, I think it is.
Very bad chess. Okay, so there.
Really bad. I don't remember. It's one of Zach Gage's games. He's just like a wizard on mobile platforms.
So Zach Gage put together this game where essentially it's a chessboard, but you kind of don't. It could be any sort of arrangement / combo of pieces. So you can get a piece, a chess game that's, all rooks or something like that. So I like the idea of maybe you could split the difference between totally absurd and realistic by saying, you've got this person's yard to do, you've got this time limit, and all you've got is like a weed whacker and like some scissor hedge trimmers and just go at it. And you're like, okay, well I'll be able to cut the lawn the fastest. So you go around with just scissors, chop, 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 chop all over the place.
I mean, if we want to get like really absurdist, then we can go like, you're a mad doctor and you have this magic powder that you sprinkle on the ground, and then zombie arms erupt from the ground where you sprinkle it and pick all of the grass in like a circular radius. So you have to find a way of covering the most amount of ground without kind of overlapping the circles. And I don't know. And so we would like give you different types of challenges like that. But again, that's only if we want to take it in the very silly direction.
I like the idea of like, or maybe there's every yard is a little bit more like a puzzle. Right? Maybe there's a dog, right, who's chained up in the yard, like a German Shepherd or something, a really aggressive dog. And you're like, I bet if I could set him free, like you have this weed whacker, you have these like hedge trimmers. If you could somehow like get the bolt off of his cage, then you could actually be in a situation where I could attach the weed whacker to the back of the dog and then, have him chase me around the yard. And that's actually the fastest way to mow the lawn. So each one is like a weird puzzle.
So while we still have some time, we can kind of split this idea to take it in the more kind of like serious direction like you originally pitched. There's another game that I wanted to reference, which I was very interested in. You've probably seen ads for it on the mobile platforms. It's called House Paint. Do you know that one?
No. Oh, but it sounds like a Ryan game. Tell me more.
It does. It very much does. And that was one of the things, like I saw a video of it. It's one of those that kind of like GIFs very well, where it's like you can create a very torn down, like it's easily visually represented what you do in the game. And so, you see the GIFs and it's like very satisfying, just kind of like painting a flat pane of a house and then it rotates and you paint the other side. And it's all based on like, it's a 4-directional movement and it's kind of like an ice puzzle in like a Pokemon or Zelda game where you flick it in one direction and then the paintbrush goes the entire way until it hits some sort of a barrier. And basically you got to find a way to cover all of the open exposed surfaces on the side of a house. Just kind of like getting around all the doors and windows and stuff like that. And so, I was expecting like, okay, this is going to be like a very satisfying, puzzle game. But I downloaded it and I didn't spend like a ton of time with it. Like I did go back to it maybe 3 or 4 times, but it just never really got difficult in any way because there's from what I could tell, no real fail state. Like you could paint over areas that had been painted before and it's fine. There's no time limit and everything. So it just felt like you're just kind of flicking your thumbs in different directions until a house is eventually painted. And that, like, even when it gets a little bit more puzzly, it's never difficult. So I wonder if we can do something like that has that kind of inherent satisfaction of the house painter, but actually has some level of challenge and stakes to it.
First of all, I'm looking at a video of it right now. I do think the like aesthetics of house paint are right there. That's That's a cool way to potentially visualize even a yard or something like that. You could almost do like, what does house paint look like when it meets Hitman Go? Like if I've got the weed whacker, I take a turn, I get near the dog, I set the dog free, and then I have to like jump up on a staircase or something where the dog can't get, so that it just like flails around the yard for a second while it's waiting for me. And like each step of the way, it's like, speaking of terrible chess or whatever it's called, you're almost like terrible lawnmower, where you're doing everything but actually mowing the lawn, because that's the worst way of completing your goal, or it's impossible to actually just show up and just cut a lawn for anything.
I always find those characters very funny in like literature and cartoons, especially, is when somebody is aggressively lazy to the point where they do more work than it would be to just do the job so that they don't have to do the job.
Right. Yeah, it's almost an Office Space character of sorts.
Yeah. Anyways, that's all the time we have on that one. We came away with more than we started with, which is great. But it's going to be a little bit difficult to name now, potentially, depending on which direction you want to take it. There's many right answers.
Oh my goodness. What do we do here? I think you could, if you wanted to sort of have the okay, I'm going to use an incredibly personal reference here. I hope it doesn't offend, because I had to sign up for a lawn service myself recently, and I think that their name is
that a euphemism?
Yes, it is. But for an assassin. But they had to, their name is Goofy. So they are, I'm dealing with a guy named the Cut King. And I just think that would be a very good video game character name. You're playing as the Cut King, who's built an empire on doing everything but actually just mowing your lawn.
I like that. I like it because it also kind of like, it has the dual meaning of like you're cutting work or something like that. So, or you're taking shortcuts.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that sums it up really well. And of course the ultimate name, Lawnmower Man, is already taken. So, what can we do?
What a shame.
Yeah. Who would have thought that would be a contentious title?
Do you think we can get the rights? Because we get to Lawnmower Man Mobile.
Well, there's a new John Wick game on the way. So, movie tie-ins nowadays are all the rage.
They're hot.
All right. Well, let's go over to my video game for today. And I will also be pitching something that I'm not confident we haven't done before. That's the gamble that we take every week when we sit down to record Playwright.
I know, especially after over 100 episodes, our memories do not go back that far, folks.
No, yeah, anything before last Tuesday, I'm pretty much, I'll trust that it had happened, but I won't be able to personally verify.
Right.
All right, anyways, so I want to do an audio surveillance type game. Maybe you're out in a truck outside of a criminal hideout, or maybe sometimes you need to go inside and sneak around to try to record audio, but that's the primary mechanic of the game. So either way, I want a directional mic that has to be pointed at the appropriate target at the right time, maybe with a limited amount of tape and recording time. And then maybe there could be kind of different locations where conversations are happening. And so it's kind of about discovering what are the most important conversations in each location, and recording each of those so you can piece together kind of like a neural web of evidence to try to convict whoever you're out to try to take down. So audio recording, audio surveillance, starting the clock there.
That's interesting. So talk to me a little bit about the gameplay of this. Are you almost imagining this is maybe a little Firewatch-esque or something where you're playing first person and you're controlling a person controlling a microphone? Or is this like, are you going mobile AR, like your phone's the microphone sort of thing?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking more of like a virtual setting. I've been playing Hitman recently. I mean, I've been playing Hitman for the past like 3 years.
It's kind of the best part about the new Hitman.
Yeah. But a new DLC map came out just yesterday as of the time of recording. And so I've had a chance to sit down and play some brand new Hitman map. It's been very exciting, kind of getting to discover a new location and find all its ins and outs. But one of the things that always kind of interested me and kind of put me off about this, about the recent games, is that you could pick up important information via overhearing conversations, but just like in regular video games, in all video games, I don't feel like there has been a really great solution to doing that, because, you'll hear I think games have a hard time of determining what you can and can't hear. And so sometimes you'll just see subtitles pop up in the bottom of the screen, and it's like, well, there's probably somebody 2 rooms over that is having this conversation that I cannot hear. Or realistically, walking through the city, you wouldn't have overheard a conversation that you maybe walked close enough to initiate. And then all of a sudden you get a quest marker in the top left of your screen that's you just determined the location of a treasure. It's like, oh, because I started a conversation with somebody 8 screens back. I don't know. It just always feels
except
very,
I really didn't.
Yeah, it feels very unsatisfying. And so I thought kind of a nice workaround would be a first-person shooter like audio, like a directional gun. So you really have to be pointed at who you're observing, and anything outside of that range basically doesn't count.
I think that's cool. I think the other reason why games struggle with this is very simply, if we were going to think through solutions, there's kind of 2 triggers that come to mind immediately. The first is I can kick off an audio file when a microphone is pointed at a thing, or when I know the user is interacting with that thing. Mm-hmm. I can have it be a linear stream of information, in which case there's information that the user potentially cannot find, is not findable, right?
Right.
It's kind of like if we can think through and work out that central problem, we could be asking the world of ourselves in this scenario, but if we could figure out how to diagnose that, I think that would get us pretty far.
So I'm kind of conceptualizing building this kind of like a Hitman map where it's a big open space, and kind of taking cues from Majora's Mask and the Sexy Brutale, where things are happening in real time. And it's all about just kind of knowing that location and getting to the right parts of the map at the right times. So I want a world where things continue to happen even when you aren't there to observe them. So, it's kind of about map mastery. But at the same time, I don't really know how to reconcile that, because I think Hitman has a very intriguing concept in that it makes sense that you're kind of going through this time loop of doing the same series of events again and again, because you're finding creative ways to kill a target, which is a singular goal with a lot of directions you can take to approach it. Whereas gathering audio evidence, it seems a little bit more it seems a little bit more kind of boxed in and not really as conducive to experimentation and taking alternate routes. So it doesn't seem like the experimentation would be quite as rewarding.
I wonder, what do you think about leaning on a mechanic from Her Story here? Did you play Her Story?
Yeah.
So what I really liked about the experience of playing Her Story is the listening for keywords and then searching for those keywords. So maybe this listening device has a way of isolating words or phrases or topics of speech, and then only scanning parts of the environment for those specific things. So you have kind of a physical representation of the experience of listening and then seeking out specific topics. And so maybe you feel a little less, I don't know if disappointed is the word, but a little less frazzled when you're not finding something. You're like, okay, I clearly just zeroed in on the wrong part of what those people were saying, but like all things being said are potentially important.
I wanted to also reference another game that I played a lot in the last couple of weeks or so called, I think I've even referenced it on the show before, but called Do Not Feed the Monkeys, which was in last month's Humble Monthly, which I had my eye on that game for a long time beforehand. So I was really happy that it was added to the Humble Monthly. But it's a game where you are in a society that has access to all the world's webcams and security cameras and all the cameras that are hooked up to like a network. And so you're able to like listen in as things are happening, and it is kind of real time. So like events are taking place and you have, upwards of like maybe 12 screens by the end of the game that you can switch between. But it's about splitting your focus, looking at these different screens, and then as the characters in each of these scenes are talking, you can click on certain words and it'll add it to your notebook. These are like highlighted words. And then as you go into your notebook, you can click on the word and then it'll like plug it into a Google search. And then you can combine two terms together to create another search. So, you are limited by the amount of, like, you aren't able to just like freely Google anything, because if you get a room that you've already had before, then you would know the solution to it. You still have to put in some legwork to try to solve it. But it limits the amount of information that you're able to gather and the amount of kind of corroborating evidence that you're able to piece together at certain points in time. But it does a good job of still being open enough that you really feel like you're a detective. So I'm thinking that for something like this, it doesn't make a lot of sense to aim for something that's fully open-ended and fully replayable like a Hitman map is, but rather, it's kind of like something you tackle in stages. Like stage one is you're just kind of getting acquainted with a map, kind of like your first run through a Hitman map, where you're just like discovering where everything is, how to move around without being seen. And then stage two is you're starting to gather evidence, but it's a little sloppy and you're getting bits and pieces of the story until like eventually a few runs through the map, you piece together enough of the story to at least like know where to look. And then you go on like your execution run where you kind of know where all the pieces are, you know where you need to be and when. You just kind of need to figure out how to pull it off, how to get to where you need to be, and where to point your audio gun, so to speak.
That's kind of cool. That almost has the feeling to me of, if you were going to paint a fiction around it, you could potentially have a fiction where you're doing like a CIA or KGB operative and you're slowly learning some sort of code, like everyone around you is speaking in code to try and deceive you, but you're there to sort of decipher it and make sense of it, and being able to take those words / phrases and write them down or arrange them in a certain way, and you're like, oh my god, it's every third word that matters, or it's the first letter of everything they're saying.
Coming up with codes and stuff like that. That's interesting.
That could play into that sort of setting that you're describing.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the way to add replayability would be to sort of include some of these kind of deeper connections and deeper meanings that you wouldn't really understand your first time around, or codes that you would have to unravel. Mm-hmm. I like that. We are pretty much out of time, which is a little too bad, because
we were just getting there.
There was a lot of setup, but rules are rules. So we have to close that one down and come up with a name. I was going to say that a really good name for this would be Over Here, because it has the you're overhearing conversations.
That's
and you're also
good.
Kind of like, it puts that that idea of like you are over here, you're in a physical space. But we have used that title before.
Oh, no.
Back in episode 20, I did a quick search through our website. So unfortunately,
I wonder
Can't use that one.
if our website is popular enough now where you could. Did you execute that search in Google or on our site?
No, just on our website.
Okay, I was like, I wonder if Google has a good enough index. If you search for Playwright over here, if you would get
maybe.
that as well. Okay, so now what then?
Kind of makes me curious what episode 20's pitch was. Maybe that's explore a tactic. Oh, I remember that one. That was a kind of XCOM-like game where you're eavesdropping on conversations, but it's more kind of like tactically and turn-based focused. Yeah.
Okay. So what if we did something, if it's a spy thing, you could maybe do something about like tapping phones potentially, or tap.
Say like I'd tap that, but I don't.
No,
I don't
not
think that really.
Focus.
The Simpsons tapped out is already taken.
Oh yeah, I forgot. In the time of mobile, of course, the word tap would be tapped. To be honest, this is real dumb. There's private eyes. Are there private ears?
I like that a lot. It has a secondary meaning of like privateers, like those government sponsored pirates from like back in the days of. But I don't know how that fits in with the aesthetic, but like maybe there is a way to tie in some sort of piratey. Maybe you're you're spying on like groups of modern day pirates or something. I don't know. Anyways,
potentially.
I do like that though. Private Ears is a funny title. It's a good one. And let's go to another pitch from our community. This one comes from Dylan Kelly, who says, "Howdy, y'all. It says, like Q. I read that as I like Q. Like, good, great.
Cool. If anybody wants to write in saying that they specifically like me, that's fine.
That's right. Everyone, please comment who your favorite host is of the.
Yeah, it won't create a horrible schism between us at all.
Yeah, no, we've had our divorce and we've made up since.
It's true. And our relationship is more loving than ever, really.
That's right. It's just a little bit of distance is all required. So Dylan says, like Q, I recently picked up the Oculus Rift S. And from what I've seen, there's a lack of VR mech games. I was hoping you two can come up with a pitch, for one, and put some kind of interesting twist on it. Keep up the great casting, makes the work days shorter. That's wonderful again. I've noticed recently a lot of people have just like kind of had a nice little sign off line of like, thanks for doing what you're doing and great job. And I don't know, I appreciate it. It's all the positivity has been, it's been great. I think about it during the times that we're not recording. Anyways, we are coming up with a VR mech game. Let's start the clock. We should probably acknowledge the ones that already exist just to make sure that we're kind of giving props where it's due.
This is great. Spend my money. I don't necessarily know what they are.
All right. So I know of, all right. So there was one, I think the earliest example that is not VR, but is still kind of relevant to what we're doing is a Mech Warrior game on the Kinect. Does that sound right? I don't remember. There was one of the big kind of like mech franchises put out a Kinect game, and it was kind of critically panned because there was a lot of like reaching around to the space around you and trying to like pull on levers and pulleys and stuff like that. And it just didn't work very well. So I think like that was the first of the kind of like physical space mech games. We should mention the Nintendo Labo robot kit, of course, but I think more relevant to this would be Hamann on VR platforms. I think it started on PSVR and moved to Oculus, or the other way around, but it's basically just kind of what you would expect from like one of those mech assault type mech games, but yeah, set in VR. So just wanted to throw that out there as a nice little shout out. If you're interested in this idea, check out Hamann. I can't personally vouch for it. I think I played a demo at PAX a long time ago, but haven't played the actual 1.0 release.
So I'm looking at some gameplay of Hamann here. And one of the things that, although you're saying it, the Kinect game got panned for doing this. but Connect in general, I don't think ever worked well. So that's potentially why.
Well, okay, we can have this conversation off mic. There's a few games I think are very, very good.
Okay, yes. I mean, okay. I mean, I had both Connects. I have a lot of affection for them, but like in terms of reaching behind me or something to do
3D
something.
space has always been a little difficult. I think Connect works best when it kind of mapped your movement onto a 2D space, ironically.
Yes. Okay. So we're in agreement there. No argument necessary. But one thing that I think Hawken could do and I think makes for me the mech fiction, or at least the mech fantasy that I want to have, is not just like a first person shooter in a machine. That's kind of how a lot of these things end up playing out. I really also want the experience of things going wrong with the machine and having to real time, like, potentially diagnose / be able to fix those in a way, whether that's either remote or like if fires happen, like episode 1 Racer, right? Potentially there's a fire extinguisher inside my mech, and so I have to like pick that up and put out fires and stuff. But like instead of these, die and respawn, like having truly incredible, quote, tanky machines that you're spending, a long time with, and you have to sort of manage as you go in a battle, I think would be closer to the like mech utopia fantasy in my mind.
So this is interesting. It reminds me of one of our early pitches, and I'm not remembering the name, so forgive me for that one, but where the mechs are kind of like Shadow of the Colossus scale, and you have to like move around the mech and perform different actions in different like physical spaces. So
this is one of our first pitches, I think.
Yeah, it was pretty early on in the run. So it kind of has like a Lovers in Dangerous Space-Time type appeal to it. Where you're splitting your attention. I think the challenge in VR is that you don't really want to, I guess you want to minimize movement as much as possible because like, motion sickness and all of that, like it makes more sense to be physically planted in one space. But what you could do is do more of a kind of remote warfare type thing and maybe have like 5 robot bodies set up in this one overall mech, each of them performing different tasks that you have to like swap between on the fly. Like maybe you have a panel of screens, kind of like a Five Nights at Freddy's type thing where, you switch between each of these different views. And that's basically transferring your, I want to say consciousness, but your VR presence into another one of these robots. And, maybe there's one in each limb or one in different like parts of the machine. So some of them have to, I don't know, like fix hole breaches. Some of them have to, and it's all kind of like puzzles with like what you have in your arm's reach around you. So you don't have to move around in each of those locations. Almost like another game, I Expect You to Die, which is a James Bond simulator in VR where, you're in these wild, lavish James Bond scenarios, but everything that you need is within arm's reach. And so you just kind of have to figure out these like puzzle room type scenarios. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's a way of doing it, kind of splitting your attention between multiple locations in the mech.
It would be kind of interesting if, you were playing, warfare. I can see it right now. If you gave it like a 1980s video game intro, you're like, first there was human warfare, then there was humans and mech warfare, and now then there was robot warfare, then it was humans and mechs, and now it's robots in mechs. And so like warfare has just evolved where it's like, what is even happening anymore? It's just machine on machine. Like this is nothing. But that could be a cool, like you can quickly download, or you could go cyberpunk with it and go very Matrixy. I like the consciousness switching, and you could take over small robots that are all of different sizes that can do things like crawl into mech legs, and like one of them repairs circuitry. So I'm going to like put myself in the circuitry robot, and that has a certain type of movement and mechanics and certain, abilities. And then if there is a fire going out, then I have to like take control of the fire extinguishing system. And there's a whole mini game or like set of interactions involved with that. So all of it is static, but I think if you have each of those mini games be satisfyingly short, then I think you could also do the like, by the way, there's a battle happening outside this whole time. Maybe the battle is something that you're never actually manually taking part in, but I think that would be cool.
I think it'd be kind of mean to rob somebody of the pilot seat experience just because they bought a mech VR game. They kind of probably want to have that experience, but
just put out fires. This sucks.
Yeah, exactly. But it reminds me of another game I played recently, which is the Psychonauts Rhombus of Ruin, which is the VR game that Double Fine put out to promo Psychonauts 2. And that one did have a lot of like kind of mental projection and projecting yourself into the perspective of different creatures. And all of that was kind of like you can project yourself into any like living being within eyesight of you. And so you kind of had to form these like chains whenever you wanted to go anywhere. And there would be kind of beings of different sizes. So at one point, there's a very memorable point in the game where you like project yourself mentally into a rat. And so then all of a sudden, like this room that you saw on human scale before is now like way bigger in your rat scale and everything. And you project yourself into like a flea or something like that. So, it is this kind of like changing scale problem. A potential problem that can come with that is being disoriented. And if you're wanting to go down to a leg to, patch up some sort of a flaw down there, then always making sure that you're like going in the right direction could be a little difficult because you're kind of like teleporting into different viewpoints all the time. But otherwise, it might be a solution.
That's kind of interesting. I would get this occasionally with as I was playing Lone Echo, I'd find myself being like, whoa, okay, like I need to reorient myself or something because I just didn't have my bearings. How to solve it? Yeah, maybe there's some like sort of magnetized mechanic or whatever, or some like internal compass that the robots can have that allows them to like quickly perceive or center themselves around what quote up is.
Or robots can be just like really cleverly color-coded, and we can make the insides of robots, or the mechs rather, be rather unrealistically hollow. So you can always kind of see the outline of where you're going. And if you know that like, okay, right leg is always red and left leg is always blue, I'm heading in the red direction, so I'm okay.
If you were going to design a mech to be like real-time serviced by a human transferring their consciousness around, then you probably would have like, those very sci-fi like arrow markers and stuff all over the place. Lots of chevrons making appearances, I imagine.
Yeah, I like that. We're out of time again, just kind of barely scratching the surface of this one. I don't know if we really even got into what gameplay fully is, but it at least gives us some ideas to think about and some other points of interest to look at if this is your type of game. So let's give it a name and put it out onto market. There's the Mech Assault series. I wonder if like MechAssist is anything.
Yes, it is. Wow, okay. I was actually, for whatever reason, that was triggering me to go into like Mech Survive or
like the Metal Gear route.
Yeah, or like a mech maintenance man is kind of a little bit what you're doing too, but that's really kludgy sounding. So
MechAssist is then. Thank you very much, Dylan Kelly, again for sending that in. And if you would like to submit a pitch of your own, you can do so by going to playwrightcast.com/pitch. You can email us playwrightcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet us @playwrightcast.
Special thank you to PROTODOME for the use of our theme song, Hello World. It's off the album Blue Noise, and I follow PROTODOME on Twitter. There was a very fun tweet. It'll now be a week old, so you may have to go back and see it, but it looks like him playing clarinet with a laptop in front of him, being just really dumb and silly, so I loved seeing that. And of course, hey, if you have time, and really, who doesn't? Go check out the Kane and Rinse Podcast Network with great shows like the Kane and Rinse Podcast, where they're gonna review. What's the next game coming up for Kane and Rinse?
Should be Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong 94, I believe.
Oh, I love this. I'm ready for a true Donkey Kong 64 successor. How about you?
Donkey Kong 94 is not necessarily 30 more than the last Donkey Kong game, but I am definitely, I'd be into another 3D Donkey Kong game.
I also, by the way, that's the Canon Riz podcast. Sound of Play, great video game music. And there was an episode, it was kind of back in the archives. I think it was from February this year, where Chris talks to Solar Sail Games. And that was a really
Are we talking
cool
about Sausage Factory or Sound of Play?
That's Sausage Factory.
Okay.
Let me go get the date here. February 22nd. Great episode. Talked to Solar Sail Games, a guy named Neil. And they really break stuff down. And I think he articulated his point of view as to how he goes about things pretty well. So anyway, a cool episode to check out of that if you're looking for a specific recommendation.
Nice. All right, let's close out the show today with a miniature pitch. Q, what are you going to bring us out on?
This one's real simple. This is a moneymaker right here. And you know what? It's a little bit of a cop-out. Final Fantasy VI Remake.
Let's give the best Final Fantasy another shot, huh? All right, we'll see you next week.
Bye.